What's happening in the digital accessibility legal space by Leni Feingold, a presentation given February 2020.
What kind of advertisements we'd all get. But the bottom line is everything today is digital and things need to be accessible. And as Chancey Fleet, who's a great advocate and technologist and speaker who's blind, said to me, well, I wouldn't want to eat Domino's pizza, but I still want the app to be accessible. So I think that's the same thing about a lawsuit on closed caption video by a public accommodation. Happens to be porn videos, but the lawsuit is not, it's about that, but it's about something bigger. Okay, let's see. What about the ethics? Okay, all I want to say about the ethics here is red flags and bathwater. I've written a piece. I have the link here. I'm sorry, I see now that the contrast isn't very good. It's on my website, lflegal.com/2019/07/ethics-2. And in that article, I go through all the red flags that we have to be cautious of when we see a law firm that's filing 10 lawsuits a week on the same industry in alphabetical order. Is that the wisdom of the ADA? Is that about inclusion, or is that about something else? So I invite you to read that if you're interested in the ethics piece of it. The bathwater idea, which is this great woodcut I have where a woman in the olden days is dumping out a tub and the baby is coming down with the water, because no matter what we think of these lawsuits, no matter what we think of the type of lawyers or their motivations, we cannot let it interfere with our belief that the ADA is a civil rights lawsuit and people are using it for good reasons and there is wisdom in that law. So it's really all I can say about that now. How do you get ahead of the legal curve? That again, we could do 3 hours on, but I just want to do some highlights, because if you're here, first of all, you're a champion trying to help your organization get ahead of the legal curve. So I salute you for that. And I hope having the information about the types of lawsuits and the laws can help you in your championship role. Here's a few other things that we have time for today in terms of getting ahead. The biggest thing is baking accessibility into your organization's culture. And I have a bit.ly for that, bit.ly/access cookies, capital A, capital C on the cookies. This came out of a presentation that I did with Microsoft at the CSUN conference a couple of years ago, and we had cookies baked for that. These cookies were actually baked for a session I did in New Zealand. And the point of this is the following. These cookies are full of ingredients. The flour, the salt, the butter, but also on top, these ones, I asked the people in New Zealand, oh, bake something with a ton of ingredients, and there's M&Ms and nuts and coconut flakes and sprinkles and all sorts of things. And that's to demonstrate that there are so many things that go into building an accessibility culture, and there are so many things so many roles that people play. Oh, my friend from Worcester put in the chat, Jimmy's, not sprinkles. That's what we used to call them growing up in Massachusetts. But nonetheless, I think I'd become a California person and call them sprinkles. So many roles and so many ingredients. And when we have too much focus on the law, we don't get a good-looking cookie. So I've decided the law should be the salt. And the reason for that is you can't really bake something sweet without a little salt. But if you put too much salt in, then you have a very bad cookie. And you also have a situation that I write about in this bit.ly link here, bit.ly/65% with the capital P and the capital C, when I was asked by a very well-meaning person at a higher education conference, well, our captions are 65% accurate. Is that ADA compliance? And, when I do this at a live audience, and maybe in your offices now you're chuckling and we're like, oh, that's, no one should say that. That's ridiculous. But the truth is, this is what happens when fear is driving the efforts of inclusion. Even the word compliance, yes, you want to comply with the ADA, but that can't be your main driver. Your legal departments, I don't know if anybody's here from a legal department, but I can't tell you how many people say, oh, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to do this innovative thing around accessibility, we want to do this PR, and it's the legal department who is saying, sorry, can't do that. We're afraid of a lawsuit. So try to keep the law stuff, as a salt in your cookie, and don't make like a big salt shaker out of your accessibility efforts. So staying ahead of the legal curve. Standards and inclusive design is everything. This is illustrated, it says design for 7 billion, design for 1. Yes, it is difficult to get people past in compliance to inclusion, as someone just wrote in the chat. The best way to do that is have people with disabilities involved at every single stage of the process. Because if someone is in the next cubicle and they're deaf, it's less likely you're going to design something that the person can't use. So design for 7 billion, design for 1. This is a Microsoft slide, but Microsoft is not the only organization that has really put an effort on standards and inclusive design. Adobe has really good information on this, other organizations. So obviously that's an important part of the cookie. Too much, again, the legal, so many lawsuits, is it WCAG, is it not WCAG, and all the focus goes on, do the developers know about WCAG 2.1 and can they comply? Well, it's not just about developers. It's about designers. It's not just about standards. It's about systems and processes and training. So staying ahead of the legal curve, that's critical. Transparency, which I have a nice picture of a clear bubble looking up at the sky. I have a bit.ly on that, LF legal state, capital LFL, and the rest are small letters. Sorry, this S should have been larger. I think it's very important to share what you're doing about accessibility. That website link, I keep track of accessibility statements. The Web Accessibility Initiative now has a accessible statement generator and gives you a lot of good information about how to do an accessibility statement. This, again, is a place where the legal departments are like, well, we can't really say anything because if we're going to get sued for not doing enough. LFL, and the rest are small letters. Sorry, this S should have been larger. I think it's very important to share what you're doing about accessibility. That website link, I keep track of accessibility statements. The Web Accessibility Initiative now has a accessible statement generator and gives you a lot of good information about how to do an accessibility statement. This, again, is a place where the legal departments are like, well, we can't really say anything because if we're going to get sued for not doing enough. Not my experience with legitimate civil rights lawsuits. So I really, by having an accessibility statement, by having a clear method for people with disabilities to contact you with feedback, a good response system, you're going to get, first of all, you're going to get information from the public or your students or whoever you're serving to be able to go to your higher-ups with the budget control and say, look, we got this complaint from this person because we made it available that we're working on this. So transparency to me is an important part. Training and testing, very important. Again, this whole Iowa hashtag Iowa disaster wouldn't happen. They didn't train people on how to use the app. They didn't test the app in any meaningful way. And that's very, very important in terms of digital accessibility. Procurement. I want to give you this resource. Again, this is from Disability In. I worked on this resource. So just to be transparent, because I believe in transparency, you can find it on the Disability In website under resources. I made a bit.ly link, capital DI Pro Toolkit. This is a very robust document with examples from the Disability and corporate partners about baking accessibility into your procurement process. You can't really have accessibility in 2020 without looking at procurement. And it's not just about, as we said earlier, California Parks case, it's not just about a line in your contracts. It used to be enough to say product will be accessible or product will comply, the dreaded word, with the ADA. No, there needs to be accessibility thought of from the very beginning, and the request for information, getting people with disabilities involved in evaluating the proposals and testing the proposals and having roadmaps. So it's a very long document with links to get into various pieces. Do you even know, sitting here, do you even know what your organization procures in the technology space? You have to have a baseline to know what to prioritize. So these are some of the ideas in here, but for the takeaway, it's like procurement, it's also more than your procurement department, or more than one person who signs off on the contract. You know, there's so many ways to bake it in. Like if you're going to buy something that's not accessible, what's the procedure? Who has to sign off on that? How are your people with disabilities in your workplace, in your group already involved? So I really invite your attention to that, to look at procurement as one of the indicators, one of the ingredients in the cookies. And the last one I want to mention, these aren't all the ingredients, but recognizing the expertise of disabled people. I have two I'll get to that 2.1 thing. I just saw that question. There's two people pictured here. One is a blind person with his guide dog in a Red Sox uniform. This is Brian Charlson, who's a technologist, who's wearing the Red Sox uniform, who was instrumental in working with Major League Baseball and structured negotiation. And, you know, in that structured negotiation with Major League Baseball, we did the whole thing on the telephone. In the very first meeting, when the Major League Baseball people met Brian and the other blind fans that we put together, it was like a match in heaven. And people wanted to do the right thing. Yes, these are civil rights, and it's important for inclusion to recognize the civil rights. It's also a thing to do. It's also a brand enhancer. It's also a team motivator. It's also a market grower. Many, many reasons to do accessibility. This is a legal webinar, so we've been focused on that. The other person is Kit Lau, who was the advocate when we worked with Charles Schwab. And again, when Charles Schwab people met Kit, who is an options trader, which is very, very quick activity that she does with a screen reader and a braille display, there was a match. So any way you can involve disabled people in your accessibility efforts, if you don't have enough disabled employees in all aspects yet, there are resources to bring people with disabilities in for feedback, for testing, for evaluation. So I'd say this is the most important ingredient. Maybe this is the sugar. What's the biggest ingredient? The egg, the flour, I don't know. But if law is the salt, this one's bigger. Okay, how can you keep up with what's happening? The Accessibility Initiative, the ADATitle3.com blog, Accessibility in the News. I don't know how they cover every single case that comes out, but they seem to. National Federation of the Blind is doing great work in this space. They have a legal page. Accessibility Twitter, as I mentioned. On my website, I try to do legal updates. I have a legal update tab. Conferences, CSUN is coming up. I'll be doing the legal update there. Access U is a conference in May in Austin. If you're not familiar with it, I'd look it up. Accessibility Toronto has been a great conference. So really look at the conferences. And I want to make sure we have a few minutes for questions. So I'm going to put up the final slide, which stay in touch. It has a picture of a dolphin because the typical sea creature that people think of with law, shark. And I don't want to be a shark. None of the clients I've ever worked with over 25 years wanted to be a shark. And when I was looking around for a sea creature, I actually talked to two PhDs in marine biology. A dolphin communicates, a dolphin collaborates, and a dolphin is kind of my role model for how to best use the law to advance accessibility. So I have my Twitter up here at LFLegal, my email, be in touch, lf@lflegal.com, and the website is lflegal.com.